All right, so this is the last of the principles. This is our last part. We'll talk about principle 4, how do you become liable? Okay, this is the overview. We discussed all these already. Principle 1, principle 2, principle 3. Now let's talk about this one, principle 4. I made this intentionally the last part of the lecture because based on my readings on the past bar exams, there not much questions are asked that will make you apply these principles. So I'll demonstrate that in a bit. All right. So let's go to module 4 discussion. We talk about negligence or not negligent. Now, this is a question of fact, and you can swing from one side of being negligent or not negligent from one side to another. These are the things that you'll have to think about. Was the standard of care followed? Was the standard of care just an ordinary diligence, or was the standard of care extraordinary diligence? You'll have to check also who is the cause of that damage. Would the presumption of negligence theory apply? If the person caused damages, would the principles on strict liability apply? Example a while ago was if the employer was inside the vehicle while there was a driver, we know that the driver caused the damage if there's an accident, but in strict liability rules, even if the employer was inside the vehicle, then the rules will change. That we discussed that in principle 3. Now this one, we read this a lot in law school, but based on my readings on the past bar exams, there's a little, not much questions are asked on these theories, but I'll discuss them in a bit anyway. There's a lot of discussion on fortuitous events, so you'll just have to remember that a fortuitous event is unforeseen, unstoppable, act of God. You'll just have to check the definition. But the general rule is if there's a fortuitous event, there is no liability, except there are exceptions. If the defendant was without fault and if the defendant was not in delay. All right, so let's apply it here. Example is A was riding in B's car. There was an accident. Passenger A flew because passenger A was not wearing seatbelt. All right, so let's apply these principles. Was the standard of care followed? Is this an ordinary diligence or extraordinary diligence? Based on the facts, well, you could argue that, well, ordinary diligence applies and looks like the proximate cause of the damage of passenger A was because of his contributory negligence for not wearing a seatbelt. You would say, well, A is not negligent. On the other hand, let's change the facts. A was riding in B's car, but B was a common carrier. There's an accident, passenger A flew away for not wearing a seatbelt. Well, you could say since this is a common carrier, extraordinary diligence is required. B, the common carrier, did not check if the passenger was wearing a seatbelt. You could say that standard of care was not followed, therefore B was negligent. Maybe you could argue, well, passenger A contributed to his damage. I guess if it's a common carrier, well, the principle that the common carrier should observe extraordinary diligence and carry the passenger safely as possible, as far as human foresight can provide, would make you conclude that, well, B is negligent if B was a common carrier. Another example, A was riding in B's car. they were entered in a racing event. So they were racing. There's an accident, passenger A injured, flew away for not wearing a seatbelt. Well, you could say probably that B was not at fault. B was not a common carrier. You could argue that B applied the ordinary rules of complied with the ordinary rules of diligence. It was A who assumed the risk of getting into an injury because they were entered in a racing event. All right, so for the last item, let's talk about the fortuitous event. I have some bar questions regarding fortuitous events. Remember, fortuitous event is unforeseen and avoidable. Take note that defendant must not have been at fault when there's a fortuitous event, or the defendant was not in delay. Here's some bar questions. All right, fortuitous event. Okay, there. These are the words that you use to describe a fortuitous event, except that the debtor should not have contributed to the aggravation or the injury. The last item here is a 2015 bar exam. There's a dressmaker to make 2 dresses, but here, look at this. On the day X was supposed to deliver, she had an urgent matter to attend and will deliver them the next day. Take note, this already says that on the day there was supposed to be a delivery. So there's a delay. No, robbers came in. That is a fortuitous event. But since X, the dressmaker, was in delay, there, you could not argue anymore that there was a fortuitous event. So that's it for our bar review on torts and damages. If you have questions, just inform me. Thank you.